Hi, welcome to Summer of the Arts Creative Conversations. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm the Development Director for Summer of the Arts. And today our creative conversation is with Annie Savage.
Hey,
Annie,
Eric.
hey, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Will you go ahead and can you introduce yourself as a musician, as an educator, as a person?
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I'm an Iowa native, and I grew up in Mount Pleasant, and I have been teaching in the public schools for about 23 years. I was a touring musician and 12 professional albums out, and wow, I just really love Iowa. My family's here, and did a lot of time on the East Coast, did a lot of time out west in Boulder, Colorado. I moved back about 5 years ago to take the Liberty High Orchestra gig. And so just getting into all kinds of trouble out here and enjoying
Awesome.
it.
Well, thanks for bringing the good trouble.
Yes.
We really, really
Good trouble.
appreciate it in this community. So can we do like a quick musical bio? When did you first encounter music? When did it become part of your life?
Well, like a lot of folks in Iowa City, I grew up with the Suzuki method being a part of my early childhood violin playing scene, and kind of like a lot of folks at Prusel School of Music is such an
yeah.
amazing institution here in Iowa City. I learned how to play by ear first. And so when I was playing in a rural fiddle contest at like age 10, I was asked by one of the judges to be in his band. And his 65 years old to my 10 was just like the perfect combo platter. So I cut my teeth in the nursing home circuit, and we played 3 or 4 times a week for about 10 years. I went on to the Interlochen Arts Academy, got into classical harp, and then went through schooling and did a lot of classical playing on the East Coast. Moved back after a stint in the electronica scene in Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow.
And kind of ran out of road, just like, wow, okay, I'm on the edge now.
Right.
And moved back to Iowa City, where I met my first husband, Stacy Webster of Wintergrass. We formed this band, the Mayflies, and we were kind of alternative bluegrass, jamgrass, before that was even almost a thing. And that band stayed together for 7 years, and I then kind of parlayed that into about a decade out in Colorado's Front Range, where I toured internationally as a bluegrass fiddle player and singer. And then when Liberty High School opened up, I moved things back here, and having been a person that had traveled a lot, it just didn't feel right to me to get stuck in bluegrass, which was just kind of this like other white meat in Iowa. Specifically, it's definitely my roots, but as a teacher and as an equity inclusion-minded person, then it was like, what can I do with my background, and how do I bring in the harp with the bluegrass fiddle? And I saw Rhianna Giddens play the Englert a few years ago. It was easily the best show I've seen in years, and it changed my entire paradigm about what it means to be a performer. And so now I'm bringing the harp, I'm playing fiddle in my shows, I'm doing a lot of singing, and that has really changed the way that I see kind of the walls between genres. And so I'm doing a lot of electronic stuff. I just finally, at 47 years old, am unrestrained, when I go on stage, and that's changing my performance career pretty quickly, and it's changing my classroom and what I do as an orchestra and secondary general music teacher. It's almost like the whole world has kind of blown up, and did some work with Blake Shaw and the Freegrass trio, which kind of was like pushing that boundary a little bit. And I have my band, the Savage Hearts. I have a group at Liberty called the Free Strings, and I am piloting free strings programs across the country right now for other orchestra teachers that want to get into this kind of work. So I don't see any difference between my life as a performer and my life as a teacher. I used to put things into boxes, and as you get older, the walls between things just kind of integrate into this is just who I am. So it's been a good ride. I've done a lot of different kinds of things.
That is fabulous. That's great.
Wild.
I really appreciate you bringing it back here and doing so much in our community musically.
Well, it was the roots, it's your roots. And Al Murphy, the Fiddler's Picnic. I had so many memories of people in this area who had believed in me. And I would call back when I was touring, call back and talk to Al, talk to Guy Drollinger, pick up the phone. And so as my own kids were starting their careers as young musicians, it was wanted them to be close to Stacy and all of the things that he has brought to the local music scene. Wanted to get close to my mentors. And ironically, I thought at first that was going to really cause me to narrow in as an artist. And through continuing to travel internationally and teach in lots of different festivals, it's really been this expanding of what I'm able to do. And Iowa City is always good at giving you a safe place to start something. And the support of people around you, to do that. So it's just with gratitude that I'm back. And as long as I travel a lot, I can pull it off.
Right, definitely. Small world, big world kinds of things.
In the middle of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really sad to come back from Colorado, which was a very rich jamgrass scene, a very global bluegrass scene, and I was a president of the Colorado Bluegrass Music Society while a lot of that was rolling out, and so it felt painful at first, and then I realized how stinking close I am to New Orleans here.
Oh yeah.
how much easier it is to get to Tennessee.
Straight shot, straight down.
Yeah, and I just people like Doris Prusel. And the legacy of string teaching and playing in the Iowa City School District, it made a lot of sense. But to do it then meant pivoting and really approaching it with this equity and inclusion layer to it, or it would have felt backwards to me.
Right.
So just kind of involving kids in string playing that might not have done that in the past, and just kind of creating my own way in it, and with the support of a lot of people. And I'm a big fan of the Iowa City School District.
That's great. I wanted to talk more about what you're doing in your classes. We talked a little bit before we got in here about this class that you're running.
Yeah.
Now about the ensemble. So is that something we can unpack a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. The numbers of kids who are in large ensembles in the district was not necessarily racially reflective of the demographic of kid in Iowa City schools. And so Superintendent Degner asked me, what can we do to really change this? And after years of trying to kind of recruit kids into orchestra, I realized this is about creating a new curriculum. And so I love Beth Brown, another great Iowa City educator, kind of visionary, Iowa native, had started this class called Hear My Voice at City High. And I reached out to some folks through my work at the University of Iowa, and we put together a music technology curriculum, which then became a beat making class very quickly, which then became a rapping over beat making class, and then became pretty instrumental in the idea that the racial demographics of our music department are starting to reflect the racial demographics of the building that we're in. And I don't think I could have ever seen what would happen in my own life as that was unfolding, which was that freeing from just being a bluegrass fiddle player into, oh wow, playing harp over a Fugees inspired version of Killing Me Softly with kids who are rapping, kids who are singing, kids who are playing guitar, and really just the explosion of my life as a classroom teacher into kind of a music producer in the classroom. And so it's like the joy of my life, and really not a lot of altruism in that. It was just kind of crack the door and then watch the kids kick it open. And we've had a lot of great luck with Summer of the Arts. We've done some creative programming. I always tell the kids, you got to get the money up front, get the money first.
That's right.
And without the support of an organization that believed in it and gave us a little bit of fiduciary exchange, I wouldn't have been able to build those relationships with the kids themselves. So I see what I do in my secondary general music class as facilitating what the students want and using my career as a performance and my knowledge of the music industry and how to run sound and put on a decent performance as kind of feeding into that. And it really saved my teaching career because I was 23 years in, starting to get a little bit burnt out, and it saved my love for what I do. And wow, it would be very difficult to imagine not doing that at this point. And so now I kind of look at pre-service teachers and other people who are going into the field, and I just, you don't have to be limited to what already exists. If you're a music teacher as producer, you can get in the mix and play alongside students and figure out what you need to learn how to do, which is a lot of times run a sound check and that kind of thing, to do these kinds of creative collaborations. And
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, what I was thinking when you were saying that is that there's a lot of practical skills, there are a lot of practical parts of musical life, musical professional life, that you don't necessarily run into in the classroom. And if you're a student and your teacher isn't someone who's been out in that world, how would you learn those things?
They've got to come into teacher preparatory programs. And, I am working on my dissertation at the University of Iowa and studying the barriers that people who do what I do in very different ways. There are a lot of people out there who do it who you never hear about because they're not playing main stage festivals, but in their classroom, they're like, this incredible artist. And so studying the barriers that they face and how they navigate around those barriers. And this is one thing, Iowa City Schools has never said no, even if what I was asking for was a lot of money, a lot of equipment. I was very fortunate to come back into a district that had the means. And I just had to give a mad shout out to Matt Degner, who said, we need to change this, how do you do it? And I just happened to be one person among many who had that music industry experience to say, this is how it would happen, because a lot of the barriers just classroom teachers don't know how to run a PA system. Right. And so they are very afraid to put a rapper in front of an orchestra, because what happens if you can't hear the rapper? I mean, just like these very pragmatic kind of, it may not have anything to do with race. It may not have anything to do with culture. It's just, we are not examining the actual barriers of, do they know how to run a sound system? Do they know how to put people together? And I think the interest has been there for hundreds of years.
Right.
But the know-how and kind of tackling what keeps people from doing it hasn't been examined. And there are a lot of people that are doing cool things. Yeah. I mean, and certainly the pandemic. Wow, John Welch at West High started doing some very interesting things with, tracking in the studio and taking an orchestra, and did some work with the Red Cedar Chamber folks. And so, the pandemic was like the mother of invention is necessity, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. So that was a thing that blew people's minds for a minute, and then it's like, how did they respond to it? And yeah.
Like one of the things, you're talking and I hear things, I have thoughts going off in all different directions, but one of those directions that I was thinking of is the role of musical educators, formal and informal, right? As and the way that's sometimes not recognized. I've spent a lot of my life reading musicians' biographies, and the popular narrative of musicians learning from their idols as being popular musicians is often complicated by the fact that they had this teacher somewhere at a school. They had someone in the community. You know, you've mentioned Al several times, right? As someone who's so important to the musical community here. And I just wondered if there are any other local, I don't know, highlights, people who are influences in our musical community that people wouldn't necessarily be aware of because they're not famous.
Right. Yeah, there are so many great folk musicians in the Iowa City scene. And I had a mentor that showed me how to play and just without judgment. So I had a high number of like I say, I cut my teeth on the nursing home circuit. And in my darkest moments as a performer, where like the lifestyle or the stress of the ego, you know, trying to live through your ego is something that a lot of performers do. I had to reflect back on my happiest times, and it was when I was serving the community through my own musicianship. And so there are people that just kind of gave freely of their time. And I think another person in the Iowa City community that's done that for me is Damani Phillips.
Oh, great.
Who is, you know, putting together a jazz department, but like has been very generous with seeing me as the person that I am instead of the way that I fit into, you know, my little niche in the academy. And in my work with him, which has mostly just been through my committee, it's been pivoting what I know about bluegrass and using that as a lens to see other forms of music making, gospel and jazz. And you know, jazz is a very loaded word, and I'm not a jazz musician, but you know, swing and blues. And so if you have the raw skills of being a chordal minded musician, like you can read chords, you can follow a lead sheet, then all of a sudden you've got access to like 90% of all American popular music, right? So I did have a mentor named Doc Nell in Mount Pleasant who I guess anything that's really come to me of great meaning was something that another person just did out of the goodness of their heart. And what that did for me as a teacher is to say, if I can show you how to do it, then I'm going to do it. If I have a kid that plays guitar 3 hours a night, it may not be very, you know, it may not get me a 1+ at large group contest, but like, why would I keep them from doing orchestra?
Right.
You know, and so I think there's a big emphasis on cultural relevance and equity and inclusion, but if you just kind of approach it from an ethical point of view, you know, devoid of any kind of cultural tie whatsoever, if you just approach teaching from a student-centered perspective, then you're going to have creativity and cultural relevance and ties to the music industry automatically. And I think the misstep that a lot of classroom teachers make is they're expecting the student to meet their requirements. And wow, I would have just burned out like in 5 years if I would have approached it like that. And maybe I didn't even have the expertise to approach it like that. It's like some of my greatest, you know, points of learning have been just because of my wild incompetence. You know, it just, okay. But
improvisation,
I think,
right?
Yeah, I think Damani is a really powerful figure at the University of Iowa. Mary Cohen at the University of Iowa and Adam Harry in their community musicking efforts have the capacity to graduate some very interesting music educators. I think the folks at United Action for Youth do some profound work, and it goes unheard of. There's Cece Raudebush that offered Rock Band 101 at North Central Junior High for a long time. I mean, Blake Shaw is a very interesting figure in terms of what he does as a performer without boundaries and how willing he is then to kind of mentor other people through that. I mean,
He's been a tremendous help to us at Summer of the Arts. I can't
yeah.
even say.
I mean, he's a great teacher too. Yeah. He's a great teacher, and he's a captivating performer.
Yes.
You know, and we worked together on my project, the Free Strings method, and we've worked together off and on for years. And he's been such a bright spot in the Iowa City scene.
Yeah.
Because he's just willing. And I think it'd be very interesting to see what he does over time, you know. But in the League of Fiddle Players, I mean, everywhere from Guy Drollinger and Tara McGovern has become a really interesting person. I mean, I'm just shooting from the hip, and I always leave people out. But it's a vibrant scene. It's not always the easiest scene to monetize,
right?
You know, and we really appreciate all that Summer of the Arts does in order to make that happen. Because at a certain point, it was like, am I going to have to retire from performing? Because if it's about me going into a club, you know, for $50 a night, I'm not going to do it after a certain age. Right. I mean, I just don't participate in it anymore. Yeah. So why would I be there?
Well, it's a hard life. It's a hard life.
Yeah, and it can be a cyclical thing. But Jay Knight, very cool, you know, with the open mic thing. So many people. I mean, so many great music mentors in this town.
You mentioned your kids a little bit. So your kids play music. Can we hear about that? How music works in your family? How it's been?
Yeah. My daughter graduated from Liberty, and I think when going back to Colorado, we had a band called the Young Pickers through the Colorado Bluegrass Music Society, and I would hire people like Molly Tuttle and Foghorn String Band and Blaine Sprouse and Peter Rowan. Were all these kind of high-level performers who we were able to bring into the Colorado Bluegrass Music Society. And I think, you know, the kids would always say, my friends want to go out. I don't really have time to go play this gig. And I said, you're going to hear about Molly Tuttle someday, and you want to show up for this.
Right.
So we had some really interesting festival gigs. You know, they had a lot of beautiful spaces in Colorado to perform in. And we did a lot of really interesting festivalizing, and together with that Colorado Bluegrass Music Society had access to some interesting folks. They learned a lot from that. I do a lot of work at Wintergrass Festival in Bellevue, Washington, and I'm on their faculty and come back every year. And so the kids grew up watching the teaching piece, but also just performing like I did with my mentor, just alongside. And my 8-year-old Oliver will just come to a show and play 2 songs, and you know, it's like, you know, you get $5. I mean, so Iris is doing a lot of really interesting work in her own right, singing, songwriting. We play as the Savage Hearts duo, and she's now just kind of looking back at all of these bands that we interfaced with, and is just really building a life around your Cactus Blossoms, and Molly is a good friend of ours, and Rashad Eggleston, very interesting cello player, and we're getting ready to go out to Wintergrass and teach. And Milo is a drummer, my son, and would come in to Hear My Voice class, and I would say, you know, it'd be better if we just had a live drummer.
Yeah.
You know, because beats are beats, and they're great, but a live drummer with a rapper, that's some powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And he came in and played drums a lot, you know, and we went to the George Floyd Memorial, you know, the summer of George Floyd's murder. We went up to Minneapolis, and it was just like, you know, he's like, you could feel I had my hand on his shoulder, you could like feel his heart like just pounding. And it was like, you know, I want to do this, Mom. I want to be an agent for social change, kind of was his. And I said, you know, you could go into law, you know, that's one way to kind of get at it. And he's like, I think he's just like crazy for jazz. And so he's looking at being a music teacher.
Wow.
And like bringing the same, I don't even call it cultural relevance. It's just doing the right thing. It's not even a thing. It's just like, just be a professional. Let's just call it what it is. It's, excellence is like doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't need to code it with anything. But he is now kind of going into music ed himself, and also just has the fever, can't stop playing 5 hours
That's
a day.
fantastic.
So,
I imagine that's inspiring to see.
It's a beautiful thing because I think our kids, it's like, it took me a long time to get the humility together to see the kinds of realities that he sees.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in Mount Pleasant. He grew up in Denver. So he's got a lot more cultural fluency in some ways than I did. And it's just really, really interesting to see what they'll do. Very proud of them.
I imagine. And Iris is still playing with the Wilted, is that right?
So Iris works with Maya and Gage of the Wilted, and they were students at Liberty, and they've long, graduated from the Liberty Orchestra program. They've done so many good things. Another person I want to mention as part of that is Craig Clockey, Pappy.
Oh yeah,
a lot of people know Pappy.
Pappy is a
oh my
wonderful
gosh,
cultural
Pappy,
figure.
Yeah, Pappy comes in. He's our resident pirate. He brings kids instruments, teaches them how to play over chords. I mean, like, I don't know how the free strings wouldn't exist without Pappy. He is phenomenal. And the Wilted is really a product of his mentorship in a lot of ways. Iris is mostly we're doing Savage Hearts duo stuff, and she's doing creative writing at the university. Killer program. Again, kind of taking advantage of the good stuff in Iowa City and starting to write songs. And they both will gig with their dad, Stacy Webster, and come in and out of Wintergrass. They've got this like real penchants for the Grateful Dead,
Right.
And
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So all musicians, and Oliver studies with Marit Hervig at Prusel.
Oh, great. Marit's wonderful.
I mean, Doris Prusel to me is like just wow, a person of great inspiration and clarity for the community. I mean, Prusel's always done a really good job of finding freedom in structure.
Yeah.
Creating structures that kids can be successful within and still allowing them to have their creative process. And I just every day I'm thankful that we live in the community and Prusel is still here and all their teachers do a great job.
That feeling of that freedom and structure piece is really interesting to me because, I mean, in this conversation, I'm hearing a lot about breaking down barriers, whether they're genre barriers or academic barriers, barriers between styles. And so there's freedom, but then there's also some structure that comes from institutions as long as they're not closed institutions, right? Because you talked about funding and the difference between having access to funding and resources and access that comes from a school system, but then not having the barriers inside that system. That's just, it's not really a question. I just think that's wonderful work to be doing, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, you still have to go out and get a standing ovation. My husband's always kind of drawing me back to that. But are you going out there and killing it? Because
right.
Because that's the art form.
You got to do
I think
the
a
work.
lot of the cultural relevance piece is best communicated by allowing the music to communicate for itself. We could talk, and that's one thing music educators are guilty of, talking about the thing instead of doing the thing. And I love what you guys do in terms of putting young people on stage, creating these new kinds of venues, and because at the end of the day, you have to go out on stage and kill it, and it might be the best. It might be the best way to approach issues of equity and inclusion, to go out and play it, and have these creative collaborations on stage, do it rather than talk about doing the thing, So music is a phenomenal tool for doing that, if it's in tune. It has to be in tune.
That's right. That's right. Well, and Which kind of brings me back to one of the things I wanted to ask about. There's a quote that I've seen on a sticker of yours about, what is it, world domination through vibrating wooden boxes?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Well, that came from, the things got hairy in America, about 8 years ago. They started to get very hairy. And everybody was very divided, in this way. It just felt like, wow. Is it the end times? What is happening? We kind of had this, maybe it was in my life, but it just felt like everything was so divisive.
Yeah.
And so I was, at the time, putting together the beginning of the curriculum that I use now called the Free Strings Method. And I had been in bands before who felt like when you're running a band, and you're trying to make it, and you're planning your routing. It's almost like a pirate ship.
Yeah.
You're this little merry band of, I love Willie Nelson,
Yeah.
like a band of gypsies. We go down the highway. This kind of revolutionary kind of power to the people. This feeling that you're gonna get this club over here, and then you're gonna like go back there, and then you're gonna try and expand your draw. And so all of that kind of stuff. I've always been a little bit of a revolutionary minded, like viva la vida, power to the people. And I think it was in that time frame, it was like I needed a t-shirt, and it was like total world domination through vibrating wooden boxes, something that we can maybe agree on.
Yeah.
But I've had people who get really like, sad about that. It's like, we don't want total world domination, but then they're inside me, it's like, no, we do.
Right. As long
We
as it's
just
in
do.
tune, right?
We just do.
'Cause it's
Keep
gotta
it
be
in time
tune.
and in tune. In time and in tune. And I think it's just I don't know, it's just this trip I'm on for this lifetime. I just love orchestra and the way that string instruments have been such a foundational part of popular music. I'm a believer in American pop music and the uniquely American forms of music in blues and bluegrass, and I'm a roots music fanatic, and I would love to see kind of those dots between orchestra and those kinds of roots musics come together. And I haven't seen it fully happen in public school orchestra programs, and I feel like this is the time. Total world domination through vibrating wooden boxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing your pirate ship
Yes.
back to this community.
Arg.
And
Thank
you for the
you.
work you're doing. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the work that you guys do and all the volunteer hours and sitting at the table. I know I used to do that with Colorado Bluegrass Music Society. It's like there's a fine art to table sitting, and just we would not be here doing what we're doing without you guys. And so it's just symbiotic relationship. And thank you for Summer of the Arts work towards that. And
Well,
all
thank you.
good stuff.
Thanks so much. And we'll just try to keep it going.
Yes, keep on ripping in the free world.
That's right. This has been Creative Conversations. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks to Annie Savage for being here with us today. And thanks for having such a creative conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.